Do you feel like you're paying too much in taxes every year, or have a relationship with your current CPA where you only meet them once or just before tax time? Look, I want you to know that there is another solution to paying less in taxes and keeping more of your money. Valard Advisors is a leading fractional CFO and CPA firm that specializes in advanced tax strategies for founders, athletes, and entrepreneurs. Valard Advisors can help you navigate the complexity of business taxes and ensure that you're paying the least amount in tax possible. But this is far more than tax preparation. This is strategy. This is really getting into the data-driven decisions that your business needs to make in order to develop a long-term strategy that aligns for your business and personal goals. Whether you're looking to minimize tax liability, maximize your deductions, or plan for your financial future, Valard Advisors has the expertise and experience to help you get there. Do not wait until tax season. Work with professionals today. Contact Valard Advisors to schedule a consultation. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Generation Wealth. I am so excited for you guys to listen to this podcast interview as I get to chat with my friend, Kathryn Gordon. She is a businesswoman, movie producer, and the best-selling author of Relationship Grit. She's also the host of Kathryn For Real podcast. As a graduate of Old Dominion University, she became a top producer in sales for several companies before deciding to follow her passion as an actress and model. After having kids, she decided to focus on raising them and help her husband, John Gordon, operate his speaking and consulting business. After her kids went off to college, she started her second act, which is investing in real estate, movies, mentoring women, writing, speaking, as well as hosting her show. Today, we are going to talk all about relationships, money, how to overcome challenges, the mindsets that you need to be successful in business, investing, or in a successful marriage. And we break it all down for you. Let's get started. Welcome to Generation Wealth. I'm Candy Valentino, and I've been building businesses and generating wealth before I could legally order a drink. For more than 2 decades, I've built, scaled, acquired, and exited businesses, all while investing in real estate and building financial freedom. Now I want to help you expand your wealth and give you the proven roadmap to implement today. It doesn't matter if you're a part of Generation X, Generation Y, or Gen Z. It is time to join Generation Wealth. Now let's get started. Hey guys, I am so excited for you to listen in to this conversation as we get to have my dear friend and best-selling author and complete badass on the show, Kathryn Gordon. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, Candy, thanks for having me. I just love you.
Oh my gosh, the feeling is so mutual. And we pretty much had a whole podcast before we even started to hit record on this.
We did.
Which I knew was going to happen. But to be respectful of your time, I want our audience to be able to get as much value from you today, because I know you are filled with it. And obviously you're, relationship expert. You not only just wrote a book about it, but you also have the cred. You have the street cred because you've been married for over 20 years, which in today's world is really rare. And so I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your story, your past, and kind of what got you into really diving into relationships and how we can make them better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Funny story. You said married over 20 years. So actually, John and I have been married 26 years. We've been together 28. We were at a party the other day. Actually, I don't know if what's your age group of your audience, but the lead singer for Poison, Bret Michaels, was there. And we're standing there chatting with him. And he was telling us, we were talking about relationships. And he said, oh yeah, I've been married 24 years. And I was like, us too. We just celebrated 24 years. And John was like, honey, we've been married 26 years. And so now, Brett, that's been like the running joke. Every time you text John, it's like, your wife doesn't even really know. Oh, no, 2 of those years were bad years. So we try to forget about those.
That's right. You just erase them off.
Yeah. But yeah, I think in, 26 years, there's a lot to learn. Hopefully, if, you want to be in that, you're going to be learning and growing. And so for us, what ended up happening in my book, Relationship Grit, is not a book about, oh my gosh, look at me. Our relationship is so great. It is a book of, we went through hell. Here's what happened. Here's how we got out of it. And we're still together. And if we can stay together, anyone can. And, I want to also preface that by saying, when we go through the steps or as we go through these steps, I always have to say to people, listen, because I have a lot of my friends that have divorced or split, and there's nothing wrong with that, because you shouldn't stay in a relationship that is in any way emotionally or physically or mentally abusive. So that's not what I'm talking about. When I talk about using my framework for, your relationship, obviously, it has to be a quote unquote normal relationship and you're not dealing with some like crazy narcissist. But the grit, GRIT, in Relationship Grit is an acronym. And we can go through that.
Yeah, but, I would love to.
Yeah, I thought what I wanted to do before I do that is, really talk about money, since your podcast is all about wealth. And I just have to say, Candy, we are great friends, but I'm also seriously a huge fan. I listen to all your podcasts. I'm always sending them to my family. I'm telling everybody what we need to do. And I just love you. In this space that we're in, you are the real deal and you're so authentic. And I do really appreciate that.
Thank you. That means so much to me. Thank you. And I've loved to see, just since we became friends, all the things that you're buying and the investments that you're making and the houses and the rental properties. It's like, I'm like, yay, I'm so excited. So I love to see all the stuff that you guys are up to. And obviously you had massive success. And now you're just basically taking that and being able to parlay it into creating more assets, right? And I think that's where there's a huge disconnect sometimes, where people, it's like they're successful and they're making money and they're making that earned income. But if they don't create assets, if that earned income goes away and there's some shift in the market, what are we going to do? So I've loved to see you've really dived into this and, just closed on another rental property and all the things that you're doing. And so I love to see what you're doing. And maybe you can share just your journey in business too, because I know you guys were in a franchise space and then kind of left that and started creating this together, and maybe share a little bit about that, because I think that that's a fascinating story in itself.
Yeah. I'd love to share that. And so, but before I do that, I think it's even more important to share how John and I have navigated our money mindsets into getting where we are, because, you get a couple, they come together. In our case, we were, 29 when we got married. John was 26. He's 4 years younger than me, 3.5. And so here we have this couple. I'm pretty much, was successful in my own right, not, financially yet in terms of millions, but number one sales rep. I had my own place. It was fully furnished. John came to live with me, lived in my place, and he had just opened a bar in Buckhead called Park Bench. And he didn't come from money. He took $30,000 that he had inherited from his grandmom who passed away, and got some guys together and, ended up buying this bar in Buckhead, which actually ended up becoming like the hottest bar in Buckhead back in the day. And so we came together as a couple, and, there was a lot of events that we were doing. And John had started a nonprofit called the Phoenix Organization. And then, of course, I was doing a lot of acting and modeling along with my sales career. And it came to a point in our relationship where I had to make a decision. And if anybody knows me, you'll know that I'm a very strong woman. And so making the decision I made was kind of shocking to some, and it's not something I recommend to everybody. So I'm just sharing our journey. And I realized we started kind of butting heads on whose event was more important. What was the more important thing to do? And I literally just had this hit. And it was like, I think I got to get behind him. I'm going to get behind him and I'm going to support him. Now, John says, I just knew early on, like I knew I was going to be able to like project him to go like that, that he's my puppet, whatever, but it's not really true. But, and so I made a really big decision and a real big risk for me, because when it came to money, and this is something you always talk about, you've talked about it in the book, everybody comes from different money mindsets. And I come from a very middle class, if not lower middle class. My dad was military. My mother was a housekeeper. We, a family of 5, lived in a home that was all of 1,200 square feet. And so I did watch my mom stay in a relationship that wasn't very healthy. And my dad was a wonderful man until he was drinking. And I remember asking her one day, Mom, why don't you leave? Why don't you, why do you stay? And she goes, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And so that really stuck with me. And so here I am making this decision to all of a sudden give up my job and my career and get behind this guy. And it was a huge risk.
Was that scary?
It was so scary. And there were a couple things, though, that I feel as I think about it now, that I was willing to take the risk. And one of them was immediately after we started dating and John moved in. I mean, we really it was a fast forward 3-month thing. He bought a brand new car, a leased brand new Nissan Maxima, and he gave it to me to drive. Like, he did show that he was generous and wasn't, it wasn't like, this is yours and this is mine. I mean, right away it became ours. And so I did get behind him. And so this kind of leads me into what I wanted to talk to you about, which is the 4 C's, which are in my book, Relationship Grit, because there's some things that have to happen with couples. We all come together, we each come together with our own issues, right? And somebody might be a big spender, and then the other person might be frugal. And so that's okay. We all come together in different ways, but then it's about the first C, which is communicate. You gotta communicate, you gotta have a shared vision. And so when you're coming together and you're communicating, you're connecting, because you can't connect without communication, but you're talking about what your shared vision is. And if you guys are on, totally different spectrums, talking about budgets and who's going to do what. And so with that, there's another story in there. And so John, it's a funny thing. John is not frugal, but just like he's not a spender. Mm-hmm. Right. And I am a spender, but not on little things, but big things. Mm-hmm. And so, but he never, ever liked debt. That was his biggest thing. And I'll never forget, it was right before the 2008 crash. And I was living in a community and all of our friends were getting these brand new, Lincoln Escalades and these big, beautiful houses. And I was like, John, and he would just say, no, we can't afford it. Like, we can't. Well, little did I know, these people couldn't really afford it either, because the crash hit, right? And unfortunately, a lot of that tumbled.
All the short sales and foreclosures. And now everybody that was basically projecting, right? This is what happens. Like, in good times, it's really easy to make a lot of money and out and spend and be okay. But when bad times happen, that's what you have to protect against. And I think that, like, I've seen it just in this last COVID, so many people that are trying to look rich are buying things that they can't afford. Mm-hmm. And they're able to get by in 2006 and 2007, but 2008, everyone's bank accounts were basically shown to the world when they had the short sales and foreclosures. So it's so good that John was never a debt guy. That's awesome.
Yeah, and to this day, and honestly, Candy, but there's that time when I would start to say, like, he always wants to pay off all of his homes and everything we have. And I've always been like, let's just take that money. But at the time, the percentage is what, 2%, for a mortgage. So we're going to leave those alone. But I mean, so anyway, I want to go back to the 4 C's. So the first C is communicate, and you got to communicate on where you are financially and, come up with a budget. And we did that. And then the second one was obviously we are connecting and doing that, which actually makes you feel like you're doing it together. You have a game plan of, what your life strategy is. And then commit is the third C, because you got to commit to doing it. And sometimes that's really hard when you want those shiny new boots or, whatever it is. I can attest to that. And the fourth is care. And it's about showing you care. And by honoring what you guys have committed to, you're showing you care about the relationship and care about your future. And so that was something we've kind of done the whole time. I look back now and we've been very slow and steady. It's been a very much like a wide foundation. So it hasn't been so much as this quick jump. And Candy, this, you see it. I mean, in the spaces that I've been in the last 3 years, there's a lot of quick get rich schemes. So it's really been hard. And some of my dear friends have gotten people we know that, have a lot of money, have been fooled, have been, so it's a quandary to try and figure that out. But being in a relationship, and John and I talking about it together, we've been able to kind of work through some of that, And so you're asking me how I wrote my book. Is there anything else you want to add? I know I'm talking your ear off.
No, it's good. This is like everyone's just listening to us chat.
Yeah. I'm making your job easy.
I know that everybody that tunes in, they love, I'm very about implementation and, execution strategy, as you know. So if someone's listening to this and they get the concept of being able to communicate and connecting about it, but they've never done it, they haven't developed the habit yet, they don't have the practice of it. Can you maybe just give us some starters of how someone could start this conversation in a non-confrontational way? And what does it look like? How often do you connect about it? Is there certain things you go over when you connect? Maybe just kind of give us behind the curtain on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to say is this. I think what a lot of people don't realize is they're already doing it. They're already making these decisions and they're already, connecting and communicating. You are probably deciding where your kids are going to school. You're probably deciding, you're making decisions together all the time. Money, there's so much around money. I mean, I can tell you, even for my husband, the minute that he and I got together, he does not like money going out of his bank account. I took over the finances right away. He does not, to this day, even though he's got a little bit more money than we used to, he does not like writing checks. It's the funniest thing. So, again, we all have these different things. And so, I mean, it can be as simple. One of the things that we do, and this applies to, really our relationship as a whole, is we have family meetings. And when I say family, it can just be you and your partner, you and your spouse, and you sit down and, we would talk about what our week looked like, what we have coming up in the way of finances. If there was something that I was interested in buying, we'd kind of start to look at the pros and cons of that. Look at what income we might have coming in. Mm-hmm. And so it's the simplest thing, but it really just takes time and commitment to doing it. And for us, we would try to do that. And now this connection was more about money, right? Mm-hmm. The connection was about our relationship. Yeah. We talk about our one word. We always pick a one word for the year, and we would talk about how that was going. And I'll tell you, when our kids became involved in this, it was such a game changer because we found out things that were going on with our children that we would have never known. Mm. And what I always say about family meetings, or even just the two of you meeting, it's not always easy. Listen, there were times when John would go family meeting, and I would roll my eyes, right? Because I'd have to put my, phone down or, stop what I was doing. But it just never failed to be the thing that just really, really connected us. So that might be one way to do it. Another way that John and I, get a lot done in our relationship and discuss a lot of things is just by going on walks, right? Just taking a simple walk. So,
I love that.
Yeah.
What's your one word
Yeah. So my word this year is elevate.
Elevate. So do you each have a word or you pick
Yeah.
one together?
No. We each have a word every year. We've done it for the last, well, John wrote a book called One Word. Where is it? Oh yeah. I don't know if you can see it way down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he actually wrote a book on it with these two other guys. And so it's about, and sometimes companies will pick a word, like their word. And sometimes couples or families will pick a word. In our case, we just all have our own word. Yeah, mine is elevate this year. And I'm trying to think of what John's is. I don't know. He'll keep
More books, because he just wrote another book.
Grace. Yeah, the one truth, which is going to be mind blowing. Yeah.
Exciting
So,
stuff. Yeah. So you're doing the word. Obviously, you're making the commitment. You're being intentional, right? That's what I'm also hearing is there's a lot of intention. If we just stay on the relationship side of things, because obviously I think that this trips up people. And if we don't get the relationship part right, it's a lot harder to focus on wealth building and businesses and investments, right? Because we don't maybe have that one area fixed. Is there some maybe common mistakes or pitfalls that you see in your work or just being married for a really long time that you can give us some guidance on of things to avoid when in a relationship or communicating or trying to connect? I'd love to know.
Yes. You know, John Gordon did a lot wrong. I'm joking, but I'll tell you something. From the get-go, he never, ever made me feel bad about my decision to get behind him and support him. He never once turned to me and said, "You're not making money. It's my," you know what I'm saying? He never did that. And I have to tell you now, being on the other side of that and me, you know, being where I am now and, you know, making my own money with my real estate and everything, he set that example very early on. And I respect that and love that because I know that is part of what made us really, really successful. It was never his, not mine, ever.
Yeah.
And so with couples, I really, really recommend. Now, that's not to say if, you know, it doesn't mean, okay, so somebody asked me this, does that mean that we don't have separate bank accounts? I think you should definitely, my opinion, I don't know what you think about this, have a joint bank account for sure. If, you know, you want to have your little money, like I have a K Gordon Properties, I have other bank accounts for things I'm doing, but you know, our livelihood and, you know, our home, everything in that, we do that together, you know, and that's part of the trust and the connection. And so, a mistake I hear and I have seen is when somebody is pointing the finger at somebody else and saying, "You're not making money." And I can remember actually being early on in Mommy and Me classes as actually two women in particular who were experiencing that and did ultimately end up getting divorced. I don't want to say that's why, but boy, that's a big divide, because right there, that goes against the T in my GRIT framework of together. You have to do it together. You have to be on one team, because if you are on separate teams, you're keeping score, right? And then you both lose. So I think that's one big one. A mistake to make is to separate it. Now, listen, I have friends that are huge spenders. So I see the dilemma. And I think that's why it's really important to do the connection and the communication part, is to say, what do you really want? Is it really important for you to get all these Louis Vuitton bags and all of this stuff? Is that really going to get us where we need to go? Some of it is just working through some of the issues, right? Yeah. And some people may have to go to therapy. I mean, there's, you know what I mean? Like, yeah,
absolutely. Well, and you think about it, anybody that's doing that, you know, I always say the big spenders, even though that may be habitual because of something that happened in their broke story or some BS belief that they're dragging into the future, it's typically because there's some ego, there's something that's not being met. So they're fulfilling it with more things, right? Like whether it's an internal, you're not feeling fulfilled, you're not happy, you're not contributing to something, you're not growing in your life. So that is a really quick, easy way to fill a void. And if you don't do the work, just like in a relationship, you're going to drag that in and you're going to have that perpetuate into every other thing that you do. So I think that's really great advice as far as the, avoiding the pitfalls and being a team. And I often say every situation's different. If you have two people that are coming into a relationship and you've both got business, forever, I could get married tomorrow and I would still have all my own accounts. We may have a joint account if we owned a house together or something, but it depends on all situations. Right. So, but I do think that having that together, and also, especially for women, making sure that you stay up to date on finances, because I know on the other side, and you and I have talked about this, of women that have no clue what's going on in their finances. They wake up one day and all of a sudden the person who they thought they were with for 20 years is no longer in love or interested in them. And now all of a sudden they are left with nothing we've seen it all. And of course it can work either way, but that's just the way that I've seen it more common than not. So I think it's also important to be involved, know what's going on in your finances.
I gotta tell
you're taking control of it, but if you're not going to take control of it, or that's the husband's role, be involved in those conversations.
Know what you have. I got to tell you, so many of my friends, I'm talking people that have been married for 25 years. I'll be out to lunch and I'll ask very basic questions. And they're like, oh, my husband does all that. I'm like, so you don't know how much money you have. But it happens all too often. I was with a group the other day, and this woman, they've been together 28 years. Now they are having a lot of issues. I'm not saying this is why, but one of the things she said to me, I thought, holy cow, is he gives her a little bit of an allowance. And that's it. That's all she can spend. It's like, it seemed really militaristic, it was really, and I thought, wow, it's sad that women mostly, and like you said, it can be men, but let's face it, most of the time it is women, put their head in the sand and they don't want to know. Why don't you want to know? Again, because of where I came from and watching my mom, that was like something I had committed to myself, from the get-go. But, I got to tell you, now, mind you, a lot of times we might be young or naive going into relationships, but a lot of this stuff you can see in the beginning if you're really looking. And I'll give you a little example. So my daughter ends up meeting this guy who on the outside seriously looked like a Prince Charming. I mean, he was like good looking and buff. I mean, really, he looked like something out of the Beauty and the Beast, and just checked all the boxes. But the only thing was he was working at a nonprofit coffee shop. And I don't want to say, it's not like it wasn't like I wasn't looking for him to be, doing a hedge fund, but I just kind of piqued my interest. But fast forward a couple months into the relationship and that coffee shop closed. Oh. And he wasn't looking for another job. Matter of fact, he didn't even talk about it. And I was like, okay, this is strange. I'm watching this and, not soon after that, it was like somebody snipped a rubber band and he just became unwound. Wow. Now, I feel like that was God's grace because we were in the middle of COVID and there was a lot of weird stuff happening. But I think so many times we get into these relationships because it's not so, what happened to Jade was really a quick condensed. What ended up happening to his ex-wife, who he had been married to prior, this whole thing there, we found out about, it was 5 years. So pay attention to the money habits. I get it when you get the butterflies and everything else feels like it's clicking, but my friend Candy Valentino says, one of the biggest things you need to pay attention to is who you're marrying. That is, boom, that is it.
Yeah, you can't rationalize red flags. You can't fantasize about their potential. And I think that's what happens. We get in a relationship, we feel a little bit of that spark, and then it's who they can become and what they can do, what they can become and do with you and we can do this together. But just meet them where they are. It's like an interview, a job interview. Anyone you meet, they're going to be on their best behavior in that interview.
Yeah.
So if you see something or feel something, believe it,
Yeah.
So that's good that she got out now and not 5 years later.
Well, I think that was God's grace, really. I feel like it was like a big speed up. This guy, yeah. So
speaking of grace, what I know that you talk about grit in your book. Yep. Can you give us a little bit of that framework? Because I think it's really powerful for people to know. That's exactly what I was going to say next. Let's go through that grit framework. So relationship grit. And I'll tell you why I wrote the book real quick, in that after my kids were off to college, I kept running into women, particularly some men, that would, I don't know why, stop me in the middle of the vegetable aisle, stop me in the cereal aisle at the grocery store. It happened over and over, and start like telling me everything that was going on in their relationship. And, we're getting ready to divorce, or he's cheating on me, or she's met someone else. As I started talking to these people and asking questions, even though the answers sounded different, there was always this underlying core thing that started to emerge. And it was, did you talk about it? Did they know that? Right? I was so shocked to find out how many people are in marriages, long-term marriages, and they don't even talk, like they don't communicate. So as I started to uncover this, I would go home and then I would, talk to John. I'm like, wow, I started kind of writing about it. I ended up writing a Facebook post on something that happened. It went viral. And I realized, wow, this is such a simple principle, but so many people just don't know it. Why do you think they aren't using it? Yeah, because I think it's, again, the way you're raised. Like if you saw two parents, your parents never communicated, then, you have somebody in the relationship that doesn't like conflict. Mm-hmm. They're not going to bring up these very simple things because they don't really want to deal with it. Right. So, we all, like I said, we all come into relationship with our own issues. So anyway, I decided to write Relationship Grit, and that's kind of the background of why. And so the acronym GRIT, G stands for God. You have to bring God into your relationship. And I do know, I always say this is a little bit of a touchy subject for some. But the way I like to think about it is, if you think about 12-step programs, they have a higher power. Mm-hmm. So it's about believing in something and worshiping something or going to something bigger than yourself, if that makes sense. Now, I want to just tell you a little quick thing about this, because I used to make kind of an excuse for this one. It's the first letter. I didn't want to turn people off, people that may not believe in God, all of this. I have to tell you something. Now that this book has been out almost 2 years now, as I've shared this story on stage, podcast, at, the other day at Jay Glazer's house, and I'm talking about God, people always reach out to me or come up to me afterwards and go, I like the G the most. And that's something that we're working on. And so many people, and I'm talking about people not that are necessarily like deep in their faith, but people who, have been married for a very long time, but don't have that spiritual component and the belief together, right? Something worshiping together. So the G, bring God into your relationship. And the story on that, I can give you the quick synopsis, is that, and it's in my book, but that John had 14 years into our marriage. Everything was going fine. We were at a good place after all these stumbling blocks. John was now himself. He, by the way, is Jewish, and he became a Christian. And so he said he had something that's just been on his mind, and he really felt like it was keeping us from being as close as we could. And he had to share it with me. And he ends up sharing that he had cheated on me in the very beginning of our marriage, 14 years earlier. Oh my God. Of course. So I was ready to leave him. So he was telling me that I'm ready to leave him. So the God came in that I was ready to leave him.
And he was fighting so hard to keep the marriage. And he was on a plane and he ended up sitting next to this man that he didn't know, pouring his heart out like, oh my God, I cheat, And John said, the guy said, something very similar happened in my own relationship. And I came up with a prayer. We came up with a prayer and we say it every night. And so John came up with a prayer. And that prayer became the prayer that he said all the time. And we ended up saying together at our family meetings. And to this day, we say it. Do you want to hear it?
Yes. Tell us.
God, we invite you into our marriage and family to love us, to heal us, to unite us, to strengthen us so we can grow strong together and serve you together and raise children that glorify and honor you. And we put that last part on, after we went through this period where I was going to leave him. So John would say this prayer all the time, and I would ignore him. I was working on trying to get out of the marriage. And by the way, I tried to cheat on him. I 100% tried to cheat on him, as immature as that sounds. But I was really like big ego blow there.
And hurt. You were hurt though.
I was so hurt. And I was so hurt, but it didn't, I tried. It literally could not, it was the craziest story. That's a whole other story. And so, but John would say this prayer and I started to memorize it. And I would kind of say it in my head when he would say it at night, but I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of saying this prayer. And, a couple months in, he started saying the prayer one night and I actually reached for his hand and I started to say the prayer with him. I cry every time I say this. And I started to say the prayer with him. And that was the night that I chose to forgive him. Right.
Yeah.
And so that is the G for God, which goes into the R, which is resolve. And so what I just shared with you is John resolving to work on the marriage and me resolving to stay in it in that case. Right. But it also just means like, you know what? In today's society with this, swipe left and swipe right, so many times my kids tell me this, they're like, Mom, it's just so easy for people to not put the work in because they can go right back on the app and meet somebody else. So it's about resolving to stay in the relationship and not think the grass is greener on the other side because the grass is greener where you water it. Right.
And how do we do that? Right. Because I 100% agree that it is easy. It's access, right? Before you had to find someone in your hometown and hope that it worked. Now you have people all over the world that you have access to. How do people make a choice every day to water the grass that they have as opposed to trying to go find greener pastures?
Yeah. You know what? Because no matter where you go, there you are. If you really, think about it, you can take those relationships right into that next relation. Those issues right into that next relationship, right? You are who you are. So if you're dealing with these things in a relationship, they're going to rear their ugly head in the next one, right? So it's about resolving to stay in that relationship. And Candy, we heal in relationship. I get the idea, that sometimes, people, if you've been in a relationship, you need some time, but where we really heal and where we really work through a lot of our stuff is in relationship. Can you heal with a stranger? No.
Right.
No, you heal in relationship. So
true.
Yeah.
The reason I never really heard anyone really talk about that before. And I love that. And I think it's important for everyone to know because it's like the opposite of addiction is connection. The opposite of isolation is connection. Right. And it was interesting because after I got out of my divorce, I was like, I just want to be alone. I'm moving across the country where I don't know anybody. And I don't want to be that was exactly what I said. Yep. And I was literally doing that. And then along comes, Anthony. And it was right. This is not what I want. I want to heal. I don't want to be in a relationship. But there has been so much healing through it. And I remember thinking how is this working, healing together and healing through some things. And it's interesting because I never really thought that you couldn't heal on your own. But if the opposite of addiction and isolation is connection, then I guess that would be true. That's really good. I love that.
There you go. Yep. That's a big one.
And I'm super curious, because you went into the R, but just to circle back to the G, you said that everyone's really I really love that you shared that. And I kind of have an instinct of why I feel that, but I'm curious, what do you think comes up in people that piques their interest enough to reach out to you and say, I really like that you shared that part? Do you think it's a craving for something more? Do you think that people are bankrupt in some way? Like, what do you think that does?
Exactly that. I mean, I think, so many people, we're in this like material world. There's so much, and especially, I mean, like when I'm out here in LA, but I'm it's all over, right? But there's something missing. There's like a hole in your soul, and we all have it. And how do you fill that? You really do fill that with God, with something bigger. I mean, just thinking about it, right? When you think about, doing the right thing, I mean, it kind of goes back to that spiritual component. So I think people are searching. I think they're searching for truth. They're searching for integrity. It's a beautiful thing that I've seen, particularly, and not, I don't want to just keep it with Christianity, but I can tell you the change that I have seen in my husband from becoming, and when I say this though, for him, this is not like church going, Bible thumping. That's not my husband. It was more of like a search for God and a search for the truth, which, by the way, he wrote the one truth, right? But, as the more he started to get into the teachings, so he calls himself a follower of Jesus, right? It's not a Christian. There's a saying, don't let Christians get in the way of Jesus. Because, a lot of times with some of these churches and stuff going on, you're like, they're no better than everybody else, and they're not. And so it was more about the teachings, about love. Because there is this level, when you meet somebody that really is rooted in their faith, you can feel that love, right? And so I think that's what people are searching for.
Yeah.
And it's a really beautiful thing when you can have that together as a couple. I have seen, like I said, such a difference in John, in the way he is as a husband, as a father, as a human being, as he's gone along this path over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. Because I think there are a lot of people, and again, not, this isn't necessarily a Christian show, if you will.
Right.
I think everybody is searching for something. And I think we don't know that it's missing until we try so many different things, whether it's filling the void with, shopping or any other type of addiction, drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be, sex. Like, I think so many people are trying to fill something. And it's not until they try a bunch of things that they realize, man, none of these are working. What else could it possibly be? And I just feel like it always goes back to connecting yourself to something bigger, whether you feel that's God for you or the universe or a higher power or source, or, I don't like to get caught up in labels, because sometimes just labels alone will turn people off. But what is there? Like, what makes sense? And I think that until you have that, you can't really find out what your true purpose for being here really is. And I think that we don't really have a lot of clarity of direction. So I love that you talk about that in the book.
So, and there was a statistic. It was a Gallup poll that couples, I got to make sure I get the percentage right, because sometimes I can mix it up. Couples who pray together, so that's like ongoing prayer, who pray together, are you ready for this? Are 99% more likely to stay together. 99%.
Wow.
But here was a fascinating other part of that. Couples who went to church together, there was no difference in who stayed married and who divorced. Wow. But couples, I was like, that's interesting. That's a Gallup poll. Not to say people shouldn't go to church. I'm not saying that. Right. But that was interesting. But it was the ongoing prayer. Why? Because I think it's a lot of things. It's, you guys together, connecting. It's the 3 chords, right? The G in my book. I also say, a strand of 3 chords. It's a Bible verse, are not easily broken. So with the 2 of you, you're strong, But with that third cord, which is God, you're unbreakable or not so easily broken. Yeah. So that's what that's all about.
Well, and you're creating a habit too. Like if we take anyone that thinks it's too spiritual, just take it out of it for a moment. You're creating a habit that you're committing to together. Yep. And when you're doing that, as opposed to the smoke and mirror part of like showing up for church and wanting everyone to think that you're a good person, you're doing this privately. And I think anything that you do privately in any area that you're not trying to show to the world, it's going to have a greater impact because you're doing it for the right reasons.
Yep.
You know, if you're not showing on social media, you praying, but you're showing on social media every single thing that you do to like, oh, I donated this and I gave that. And I went to, like, what are you really doing it for? Yep. So I love that. I think that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that stat.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's that statistic. I was like, okay, wow. Yeah. That's big time. Yeah. So, okay, that's the G and that's the R for resolve. And then the I is invest. And since this is, generational wealth, I always say like, it's like a bank account. You don't just open a bank account and expect it to keep, your balance to keep going up. You have to invest money into it, right? You have to keep investing and then, it compounds with interest. And it's the same with relationships. You have to invest in your relationship. And you might go, well, duh, but you would be surprised how many people don't. I think most of us, we're busy with our careers. We're busy with our, employees. We're busy with our children, our dogs. I mean, really, we can go on and on. You just expect your significant other to just be available. Like, yeah. They kind of get the last of you. And I have to tell you, in my own relationship, this was happening with us. Like we would go out to do something and John would, be so nice and so invested and talk to everybody else and then get right in the car and talk to me like crap. And, thank God. I mean, I would call him out on this. Again, this is early on in our relationship. And by the way, we share this in the book, to tell people like, these are the things that we went through. It wasn't a great relationship. Our relationship was not great when, early on. And so, but it's about investing in each other. And I kind of have a little story about that, but I don't know how much time we have. How long do your podcasts go?
We're okay because we chatted for a little, as long as you're good.
I'm good. Okay. So John, and this is about investing. So fast forward, this was only a few years ago. And John was speaking to all the New York City educators and administrators and principals of the New York City public schools. So we're in New York City, the big hoopla, all this stuff is going on. Get back to the airport, LaGuardia, and John is actually going on to, I think, Kansas to go speak. And I was going back home to Florida. So he goes to one terminal, I'm at another. I go through the TSA and my bag goes off. I'm like, what in the world? So the next thing you know, they pull my bag, pull this thing out, and they're like, what's this? And they push the button and it sounds like a machine gun. It was a taser. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I forgot that I had put it in there. I normally, have it on my checked bag. So at that time, I pick up the phone and I call John and I go, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. I left my taser in my bag. Just get on your plane to Kansas. I'll let you know what happens. And, as soon as I get through TSA, hang up. He said, I'm coming. I want to come. I'm coming. I go, no. Don't do that. Like, don't do that. It's fine. Next thing you know, TSA is ascending on me, Homeland Security. They handcuff me, hands behind my back. I am in a little BCBG dress, low cut dress, summer dress. No, with these Tory Burch sandals. This is it. And literally they handcuffed me, dragged me down, literally almost dragged me down under the LaGuardia airport, down under the basement, threw me in the back of a van.
Oh my God.
Took me to jail.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I get in the jail cell, they've done all the fingerprinting, all this stuff. And they're like, you're going to be here a few days because it's a New York City marathon and you have to go up in front of the judge. So we're going to transport you to the Queens County Jail. And just something about that didn't sound too right. And I could tell by the way, like the police officers out, they just all kind of looked at me like, oh boy. Well, this is where the invest comes in, because thank God. Now, I got to tell you, early in our marriage, John Gordon would have never done this. As a matter of fact, I had a major surgery and he didn't even take me. I mean, he was an awful husband. Let me just tell you. This is where the invest comes in. John called the school that he was going to speak to and said, hey, I can't come speak to y'all.
My wife
I've got to get my wife out of jail. Yeah.
Oh my God. Could you imagine that conversation?
I know. They were like, what? And then he ended up finding an attorney somehow, which it ended up costing us, was ridiculous. And I did end up finally getting out of jail. There's a whole story behind that. But I used to give a story about John investing where, or really it was about me investing and helping him pick out some outfits. But I'm like, that's a pretty big investing story. Like, John invested in the relationship by getting me out of jail, Candy.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you, I was like, what are some examples that we can do to
Yeah. And so I'll give you some little ones too. It doesn't have to be that big.
That's a great story.
Yeah. Investing, I mean, there are big ones and there are little ones. I think one of the ones I talk about in the book is a big one would be maybe if your partner got a job or, is being transferred to another city. It's a big deal, right? To make that commitment to pack it up and invest in them, invest in your family, or, whatever the situation is, and move. But little investments are really the biggest deal, to be honest. John Gottman did a study, and couples who invest small amounts of time with each other are 85% more likely to stay together. So it's the small things. Yeah. So I give this story. My husband, has been travels all over. Has been doing it for years, speaking. And I swear to you, he has 5 sports coats, 7 collared shirts, and like 5 colored pairs of pants. And they all intertwine. They all match the same things. Every single time he is going to another event, I can hear him calling me from like the other end of the house. Honey, got to put down what I'm doing. I go walk in there and I'm like, yes, that matches. Yes, that, so that's my investment to him. And for whatever reason, it makes him so happy. And first of all, I want to go like, seriously, like, can we Polaroid these and just like but he loves it. And so that's my investment in the relationship. It's small, but he values my input. So I got to say, I got to be happy about that on some level, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's like a bank account, just like, our checking accounts or our investment accounts. Is every little one of those deposits stack up and also pays, interest as well into your relationship. Is there maybe a way that someone can tell? Because obviously if you're a giving, there's always 2 people in a relationship. You could have 2 givers, you could have 2 takers, you can have a giver and a taker. Is there a way to determine? Because I see sometimes how people will do that. They'll invest in a relationship and they'll continue and they'll give and they'll give. And although you don't want to keep score, like we talked about, how can you determine whether that relationship is in a healthy balance, maybe, for lack of a better word?
Well, how funny. What you're saying really segues us right into the last letter, which is T. Together. And so you have to do it together, right? It can't just be one person taking, or giving. Now, I always say there's always an ebb and flow. So you can't keep score. I can't sit there and go, well, I always do this, or you never do this, because sometimes, I'm going to give more than John. Sometimes he's going to give more than I am. There's always an ebb and flow. If there's not, that is a conversation to be had. That is, you've got to communicate about that. And sometimes, Candy, I am not opposed to saying, look, if you guys can't, come to a place where you can really see this, there's nothing wrong with getting some outside guidance.
Sure.
Yeah. But I will tell you this, by the way, I'm not even plugging this because it's free, but I was going to tell you at the end, but honestly, my action plan, it's a free action plan. It really needs to be made into a whole course. It's really, really good. a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about now is in there, and it gives you very practical lessons and questions to ask each other. And so, yeah, I mean, there are times when that happens, when someone's more of a taker than a giver. So I like to say, and I've said this before, I think I've told you this before, but it's you've got to do it together. Don't keep score, but think of it like tug of war, right? So if you're on one side and your partner's on the other, and you guys are both, trying to meet each other's needs, but it's like really your strength is cut in half. Mm-hmm. So if you can decide that, okay, we're going to do this together, we're going to be on the same team together, and maybe one of your partners is stronger than you, but you're kind of pulling together,
right,
against the opponent, then your strength isn't cut in half, it's doubled. Yeah. Right. So if you think about it like that, just keep remembering you're on the same team. And sometimes it means you got to remind your spouse, hello, I need a little something here. That's again goes back to communicate and connect. Right.
So it really goes back.
It does. Yeah. And you know what? I think personalities, let's talk about that. I think personalities kind of warrant that in some ways. One person is probably more passive than the other. Mm-hmm. Right. So that, that it's easy for that person to get taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then it could even be that someone's passive and they're not actively doing things. So that's where the communicate comes in, to be like, hey, I'm not feeling loved. I'm not feeling cared for. Can we talk about it? And then doing that in a non-confrontational way. But I love your action plan. Can you tell everyone where they can find that?
Yeah. So go to relationshipgritbook.com. And the action plan is there. And I believe Daniel put it on my KathrynForReal.com website in the downloads section. But definitely relationshipbook.com. There's one last thing I want to share with you in regards to what you just said before that. The other thing that I found, again, different stories, different situations that were coming at me. But at the end of the day, I started to hear one common theme, and I'm actually starting to write a book on this. We all just want to feel wanted, right? At the end of the day, it looks different. The complaints are different, everything. You want to feel wanted. You want to feel desired. And sometimes in our relationships, that's not happening, or someone's not speaking up.
Yeah.
And so don't forget that. I went on a ski trip. I doubt she would be listening to your podcast, and I won't share her name, but I was listening to a woman, and she'd been married for 26 years, and her husband were living in different houses. And, she was telling me, and at the end of it, I realized what she was really saying is he just wasn't making her feel desired or wanted. And I don't necessarily mean sexually, relevant, important. So just remember, we all want to feel wanted. Your kids want to feel wanted. So
employees, I always say people will work harder for recognition than money.
100%.
Yeah. 70% of people. Some people are just after the money, but most people just want to be recognized, appreciated, seen. We always said, just imagine that people were wearing a sign around their neck that says, make me feel seen. And if you can do that in customer service and in business, you'll create cult-like customers just by recognizing people and just seeing them. So thank you for sharing everything. I do have one final question, because we ask our guests this at the end, because it's generation wealth. And we just, I think different experiences, this is always really interesting, different age of our lives. This has always grown and evolved. But we like to just ask, what does the word wealth really mean to you at this point in your life?
Oh my gosh. The first thing that came to my mind is health. I think it starts, if we don't have our health, we don't have wealth.
Yeah.
And then it builds from there. And wealth for me is not about excess. I really have told my husband, I'm happy. And anything beyond where we are now is the icing on the cake. and of course I want to keep going and I want to create a legacy and I want to do things for my children and I want to donate and my foundation and all these things. But, wealth is health and just getting to a place where you don't have to worry, about your livelihood. Like that's health. That's health too. So, physically and your mindset. So for me, that's what wealth is. And then it just gets, better, I should say, or, the riches go up from there.
Yeah, I love that. So good. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, go grab the book, Relationship Grit. It's relationshipgritbook.com. Grab that assessment, that action plan. And Kathryn has her own podcast, so you can go check her out on Instagram and also on Apple Podcasts at Kathryn For Real. Thanks so much for spending this time. I always love seeing you, and just thank you for sharing with the audience.
Thanks, Candy.
And don't forget that if you didn't buy a copy yet of Wealth Habits, it is now available on Audible. And thank you so much for all of your support, because we are #1 bestseller, new release in multiple categories. And of course, if you already have a copy of the book and downloaded it and listened to the book, please consider leaving a 5-star review over on Amazon. It would mean the world to me, as well as many other readers that need this information. Okay, guys, that's it for today. We'll see you next time on Generation Wealth.